The order you do your makeup in determines what your makeup looks like.
Hey, I'm maybe Burke and you're watching Makeup for Lost Time. This is my series for trans women and other people who feel like they missed a few classes when it came to learning about makeup. And today we're going to talk about what order to put your makeup on in order to get which result. There's not one right order to put your makeup on in. There's not like one way to go about anything with your application of makeup. But if you want to achieve certain results, there are certain orders you can go in. There's different ways you can layer your makeup in order to achieve different things. Now, regardless of what you're doing, regardless of what you want your makeup to look like, you're always going to start with skin prep. Skincare is vital, and honestly, most of the time I'm doing my skincare before I even sit down to do my makeup. But on days like today, I did my skincare quite a while ago, and I was working before I put my makeup on, so I'm just going to put a little extra moisturizer on just to bring back some hydration to the skin. And then we're going to start with eyes. Now, I'm not a person who needs to really do anything to my eyebrows, but a lot of people who do need to fill in or draw on eyebrows think that they start with eyebrows in order to like set up the structure and the shape of the face. I just personally don't do that. And I found if I set my eyebrows in place first, then I'll often mess them up with like a foundation brush or something else along the way. So I actually do brows last or much later in the process, but that's because I don't have to fill them in. One step we're not going to do no matter what is primer. And that's because a good skincare routine can actually replace a primer. And if you have balanced skin or you know how to balance your skin, you don't actually need most primers. It's rare that I'll use a primer, but if I want like long wear, or if you're looking to like add a barrier between your skin and the makeup, then a primer can be in place. But I was gonna say 9 times out of 10, 99 times out of 100, I'm not wearing a primer. Except on my eyelids. Now, an eyeshadow primer is a definite for me. Most eyeshadows show up better, last longer, and just like wear better in general with an eyeshadow primer. But also, I get my eyeshadow primer a little bit lighter than my skin tone, so that it also works as a highlight color to the eyeshadow that I do, and gives me a kind of blank canvas to work from. I will say my eyeshadow game definitely improved once I started incorporating a primer. So once we have that eyeshadow primer, then we can go in with our actual eyeshadow. And I'm just gonna play around with some blue because I'm wearing blue today. We talked last week about how what you're wearing can influence what makeup you wear or how you style your makeup. And so I'm inspired by my blue shirt to do some blue eyeshadow. A reason we start with eyes, especially if you're doing eyeshadow, especially if you're working with color or really dark pigments, is because of fallout. Now, fallout would be if you're putting on a lot of eyeshadow and some of it falls not out of your eye, but like off of your eyelid onto your cheek or your lower eye area. It's going to be a lot harder to clean that up. If we already have our concealer and our foundation there, we're gonna have to take that off and then reapply and fix what we've worked on already. Whereas when we start with our eyeshadow, if we get fallout, which honestly I'm not getting any right now, which is good for this eyeshadow. But if I were to be experiencing fallout, then I could just take a makeup remover or a wipe or micellar water, and I could just wipe that mistake away before I go in to do my concealer, my foundation, my complexion. One of my favorite things about makeup is how temporary it is and how easy it is to just take it off, wipe it off, but it's always going to be easier to take it off when there's less on. Now, after we're done with the eyeshadow, we're gonna go with eyeliner. Now, there are different types of eyeliner that you can use, and sometimes for one reason or another, you might elect to use both a pencil and a liquid liner or a gel liner, something like that. In that case, I would start with the pencil, like I'm doing now, and then go in with our liquid liner. If you're using a liquid liner, you usually want that to be bold and really visible. So I would always make it one of the last final touches on your eye look. Now, once my eyeshadow looks the way that I want it to, we can focus on lashes. I remember when I first did my tutorial on lashes and mascaras, I talked about how I don't really curl my lashes. But then for that video, I literally just like tried to just to like show what it looks like. And ever since I've been a convert. Now, there are some people who will do mascara before they do their eyeshadow, but for me personally, I find that it's hard for me to kind of get through the lashes if mascara is already on them, and it can just make for even more of a mess. One of my favorite influencers, Nikita Joy, swears by the mascara first, but she's also like far more high maintenance than I am. If you want to make sure that you get every last lash coated and you're ready to clean up some mess, go for it. But I personally like to have as little cleanup as possible. Now, I am rarely wearing lashes these days. I mean, like, I have my lashes. I'm rarely wearing false lashes. But if I were, I actually don't put them on at this point. I would actually wait until the last step, like lashes and brows would probably be the last things I do. Now this I'm doing here because I realized I forgot to at the beginning, but it's good to do at any moment. Part of skincare is making sure you also moisturize your lips. So at this point, before I transition to doing my complexion, I like to check in and make sure I didn't forget anything or skip any steps. And especially if my lips are feeling a little dry, we just give them a little attention, a little love. So now we can focus on our complexion. And now I use a palette to get my eyeshadow primer down so that I can actually go in and mix it with a color corrector. Neutralizing under your eyes is pretty obviously an optional step, but I'm first going to come with a clear brush, a brush with nothing on it, and just make sure no eyeshadow got stuck under the eyes there. And then I'm gonna come in with just as much of this corrector as I need. It's mixed in with the eyeshadow primer so that it will kind of stick well and act well in the creases under my eyes. I have a lot of fine lines and wrinkles under my eyes. And also this acts as a little brightening agent because that eyeshadow primer is so much lighter than my skin tone. I don't always do this mixture, but it can be useful. And then I'm gonna come in with my foundation, which I am running out of! And now, of course, there are different orders to do your complexion in. I'm not going to go into like underpainting and different techniques like that. I think I've done a video on underpainting, or I could do another one, but that feels like an advanced skill, and this is more for like beginners. And then here's a choose your own adventure. Blush, concealer, bronzer, all of that can go in multiple different orders. For the most part, I'll start with a bronzer, if I'm even using one, because I've also talked about how I barely use bronzer these days. I'll definitely use blush more frequently, but if you're doing a bronzer or a contour, I kind of put them in the same bucket here. They're usually giving your face more shape and adding structure, so you usually want to do that before you move to concealer that's going to be highlighting. You're basically laying down, not the foundation, because that's the other thing, but you're adding structure. And then here's the choose your own adventure. Concealer before blush, or blush before concealer. When we put our concealer down before our blush, we're making it so that the blush is the top layer of what we do. And so our end result will have more blush visible, as opposed to if we lay down the blush first, and then we go in with the concealer, you get more of that bright under eye skin tone than you do from the blush. Honestly, one way is not better than the other. That is why I say choose your own adventure. And if you're going to layer powders over it, you really get to play around with how much blush is exposed. And at this point, most people would think we've done a full face, but I'm not done. I'm actually going to take my foundation brush. I'm not going to add any more foundation onto it, but I'm just going to kind of clean up the edges of that blush and that bronzer, making sure it's not bleeding into any areas I don't want it on and things like that, but also kind of blending everything together. And then when my complexion is set in a way that I want it to look, here's where I'm going to do a first layer of setting spray and let that dry. So far, every complexion product that I've used has been a cream, but every cream I've put on my face, I'm going to also use a powder on top of. This is by no means mandatory. It's what a lot of people do to kind of like set the makeup in place, but it also adds pigment to everything you've done. I personally like the blend better with some powders on top of creams than just creams sitting on the face alone. And this is as simple as we did with the creams. hitting all of the same areas just with a powder. And sometimes I'll take a pretty light blush and only use that. I won't use a setting powder under my eyes if I'm going for the more blush than concealer look, where if not, I will start with my blush before I come in with a powder to set the eyes. And I've said it in other videos, like choosing your own adventure with the order that you wear your makeup, you also don't have to do powders. I don't always set my under eyes with powder because I don't always need to. That's why I'll do a double layer of setting spray to melt those powders in. And then we can focus on the lips. Before I go in with any lip product, I will dab off whatever lip gloss or skin prep I have on my lips. Not rubbing it, not like chapping your lips. Making sure there's no excess gloss or balm or anything on your lip that could interrupt or influence the application. And doing a liner is also not necessarily a crucial step. A lot of people can skip that step, but I will say application is much easier for me when I use a lip liner.
I feel like I get a more accurate shape to my lip, but I also think it lasts longer and looks better when you have some lip liner. Now, some people will do a lipstick and then like perfect the shape with a lip liner. I have never really understood that. It has never worked for me. And I find that it's actually harder to use the lip liner when there's already a lipstick or another product in the way. But one thing I will do is come back in with my concealer and just make sure we wipe away any lip product that fell anywhere not on the lip. And there's no extra concealer on the brush, like I did with the foundation brush. Just coming in with whatever's left over on the brush and using it just to perfect. Maybe not perfect, I don't like that word. Your makeup doesn't need to be perfect, but to spot clean. And then I mentioned brows come last for me. Once everything else is set in place, I can come in with my brows. Again, because I don't need to add any structure to my brows, I'm just setting them in place when I do my brows. And then if we're wearing a false lash, big if, now would be the time that I put them on. And this is partially so that I have time to decide whether or not I want them. If it feels like my eye look is missing a little drama, then we go for it. If I like how the look is on its own, then we don't need them. And the absolute last step I will do is also optional because we were kind of doing it along the way. But if I want to add some highlight, I personally like to do it on an almost finished canvas. Essentially, we're doing the like fine details at the tail end, knowing that we could skip these steps if we don't have time or if we don't feel like the look calls for it. We keep the most optional steps for last. But these cheeks having different amount of blush is really gonna piss me off. Now, this isn't the right order to do any of your makeup. It is the order that I go in. But hopefully this gives you a little bit of insight into why I'll go in a certain order, or what order you want to go in based on the results you want to get. So drop a comment if this was helpful, or if you want to ask me any questions, and stay tuned as we make up for lost time.